Dacă cineva care nu citește m-ar întreba pe mine, recomandă-mi o carte care mi-ar trezi interesul să citesc. Fără nicio îndoială aș recomanda The Great Gatsby de F. Scott Fitzgerald. Din mai multe pricine. Pentru mine, romanul ăsta e un exemplu de roman complet. Perspectiva din care e povestit el e din prima persoană. Naratorul Nick Carraway. În primul rând îmi place descriptivitatea lui și e important în Gatsby că e povestit tot din prima persoană pentru că mereu, deci perspectiva e limitată. Și asta intră perfect cu însuși intriga poveștii, da? Protagonistul J. Gatsby, care e un om misterios, despre care nu prea știm multe. Și pe parcursul poveștii se dezvăluie cumva personalitatea lui, dar în același timp mereu este ceva nespus. Din cauza că Nick Carraway, naratorul, nu totdeauna poate fi prezent la anumite scene, da? Uneori ne povestește după niște scene, când observă efectul la ceva asupra lui Gatsby. Și deci în spațiile astea în care nu-i spus mereu totul, pentru mine romanul ăsta excelează. E ca vorba aia lui Wittgenstein, filosoful din secolul 20, probabil deja ați auzit-o. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Adică atunci când nu putem vorbi despre ceva, e bine să tăcem. Ori ar trebui să tăcem. Și oricum, probabil, aspectul ăsta la Marele Gatsby nu e primul lucru la care te gândești, pentru că limbajul e foarte descriptiv. De fapt, asta e încă o pricină, probabil pricina mea favorită din care aș recomanda romanul ăsta. Limbajul, proza, estetic vorbind, e top-notch pentru mine. Eu am citit destul de mult în engleză, probabil mai mult decât în română, și aș spune că rare ori am văzut așa o proză care nu știu să mă fac să mă îndrăgostesc în cartea asta din primele pagini. De asemenea, perioada în care e scrisă, the Jazz Age, da? The Roaring Twenties, cum îi spun americanii. Perioada interbelică fascinantă din America. Și cum Fitzgerald satirizează perioada aia, cum nu că o satirizează cu un cinism, dar e și o admirație, dar și o satiră, e o combinație, o dualitate de atitudine. Și probabil cel mai evident lucru, chestia care observi când citești sinopsisul la romanul ăsta, e despre o relație de dragoste, da? E tensiunea asta, o relație tragică până la urmă, care tot te atrage, atrage publicul larg. Probabil de-aia e populară cartea asta, dar eu cred că chiar și oamenii care apreciază romanul ăsta, ei, de fapt nu înțeleg exact de ce îl apreciază. Și eu cred că am aflat răspunsul, ori încerc să înțeleg. Pentru că am recitit cartea asta, cred că în ultimele luni, de vreo 2 ori, 3 ori, minimum, așa. Poate nu complet, dar am recitit multe pasaje. Dar până la urmă e și despre obsesia visării și cum adesea viețile noastre sunt controlate de forțe care nu depind de noi. Asta e, în principiu, istoria lui J. Gatsby, da? Protagonistul romanului. Dar toate chestiile astea nu prea spun multe, da? Adică să citești sinopsisul la romanul ăsta, îți pare că chiar e destul de superficial, gen, ok, încă un roman despre dragoste, despre trecut, da? Protagonist, un personaj misterios despre care nu știm de unde el vine, da? Nu știm trecutul lui și acest personaj, cumva, pe parcursul romanului, în principiu se fugărește după Daisy, da? După protagonistă. Asta ar fi o rezumat la roman. But that would be missing the point. Asta e să vezi Marele Gatsby doar așa, tu vezi doar povestea, dar tu nu înțelegi literatura. Tu scapi tot sucul, da? Scapi tot miezul care face acest roman așa de bun. Și aici mai amintesc ceva specific ce Eric a spus de pe Discord, de pe comunitatea noastră. El a spus că în Gatsby nu-i treaba în plot, ci de fapt în estetică, deci în descrierile astea. Pentru că, după părerea mea, de fapt plotul nu e așa de original. To be honest, e destul de generic. Dar descrierile de fapt, pe parcurs devin plotul. Ele dezvăluie ceva. Deci sună ca un clișeu, dar ca să înțelegi Marele Gatsby trebuie să-l citești. Adică tu în proces înțelegi de ce romanul ăsta, în principiu, în canonul secolului 20, cel puțin. Deși știu că unora nu le place. Which, to each its own, dar eu cred că they're wrong. Romanul ăsta chiar e bun. Deci, într-un fel, Gatsby e ca poezie. Adică treaba nu e în acțiune, dar e în ritm, în cuvinte, în estetică, în cum sunt aranjate cuvintele. Cât de nerdy, maybe, that sounds or not. Dar Fitzgerald a scris romanul ăsta în timp de vreo 2 ani și ceva, pare mi se, da? Mai puțin de 3 ani. Ceea ce, romanul e mic, adică nu e așa de mare. Ceea ce îmi spune mic, el a reeditat și a editat romanul ăsta de multe ori, da? Adică a stat la fiecare propoziție obsesiv să o facă să fie ca o poezie, să sune bine, da? Și în lumea asta, parcă a noastră de acum, în care nu parcă e principalul acțiunea, se întâmplă ceva mereu. Și at the same time, eu cred că Gatsby chiar are acțiune interesantă, dar nu cred că treaba în acțiune, nu e așa de original. Dar proza cumva devine ca o muzică. De fapt, parcă te include în epoca jazzului și parcă simți muzica cuvintelor. Sună asta tare cheesy, to be honest, dar trust me, read it. De fapt, eu uneori când mai practic să scriu ficțiune, Gatsby probabil romanul to go, ca să văd cum să scrii bine, mai ales în engleză. Cel puțin, cu stilul ăsta de proză eu mă identific și vrei, nu vrei, când încerci să scrii ceva singur, vrei să emulezi ceva și aș spune pentru mine Gatsby e exemplu. Dar tot pălăvrăgeala asta, până la urmă, e într-un fel depresos, pentru că romanul ăsta trebuie să-l citești și de-aia eu o să vă las la urmă cu niște citate din romanul ăsta. După cum vedeți, am multe anotări și o să vă citesc părțile care pentru mine au fost cele mai mustoase, da? Cele mai gustoase, cele mai suculente. Și să observați că nu fiecare citat are ceva legat numai decât de acțiune, cu ceva se developează, că e ceva important, dar pentru mine e ca poezie, adică cartea asta o deschis la orice pagină și adnotările astea mele care le-am făcut, citatele care le-am selectat, sunt de ajuns ca să-mi hrănească, nu știu, ceva din dorința mea de a vedea literatură bună, da? De a consuma literatură bună. Cartea mea e în engleză, apropo, e originală, așa că vă recomand să o citiți în original. Eu o idee n-am cum e traducerea în română, eu spun că poate să fie ok, dar defeats the whole purpose. Fitzgerald trebuie să-l citești în original. Așa că, lăsând pălăvrăgeala mea într-o parte, o să vă citesc câte ceva din carte. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope. A romantic readiness, such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams, that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. I wanted to get out and walk southward, toward the park through the soft twilight, But each time I tried to go, I became entangled in some wild, strident argument which pulled me back, as if with ropes, into my chair. Yet high over the city, our line of yellow windows must have contributed their share of human secrecy to the casual watcher in the darkening streets. And I was him, too, looking up and wondering. I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. The bar is in full swing, and floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter, and casual innuendo and introductions forgotten on the spot, and enthusiastic meetings between women who never knew each other's names. I believe that on the first night I went to Gatsby's house, I was one of the few guests who had actually been invited. People were not invited. They went there. They got into automobiles which bore them out to Long Island, and somehow they ended up at Gatsby's door. Once there, they were introduced by somebody who knew Gatsby, and after that they conducted themselves according to the rules of behavior associated with amusement parks. Sometimes they came and went without having met Gatsby at all, came for the party with a simplicity of heart that was its own ticket of admission. Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. It had seemed as close as a star to the moon. Now it was again a green light on a dock. His count of enchanted objects had diminished by one. The rain was still falling, but the darkness had parted in the west, and there was a pink and golden billow of foamy clouds above the sea. As I went over to say goodbye, I saw that the expression of bewilderment had come back into Gatsby's face, as though a faint doubt had occurred to him as to the quality of his present happiness. Almost 5 years. There must have been moments, even that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams. Not through her own fault, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. He had thrown himself into it with a creative passion, adding to it all the time, decking it out with every bright feather that drifted his way. No amount of fire or freshness can challenge what a man will store up in his ghostly heart. As I watched him, he adjusted himself a little, visibly. His hand took hold of hers, and as she said something low in his ear, he turned toward her with a rush of emotion. I think that voice held him most, with its fluctuating, feverish warmth, because it couldn't be overdreamed. That voice was a deathless song. They had forgotten me, but Daisy glanced up and held out her hand. Gatsby didn't know me now at all. I looked once more at them, and they looked back at me, remotely, possessed by intense life. Then I went out of the room and down the marble steps into the rain, leaving them there together. Or perhaps I had merely grown used to it, grown to accept West Egg as a world complete in itself, with its own standards and its own great figures, second to nothing because it had no consciousness of being so. And now I was looking at it again, through Daisy's eyes. It is invariably saddening to look through new eyes at things upon which you have expended your own powers of adjustment. Păi, serios, cum pot scrie așa? Phenomenal. One autumn night, 5 years before, they had been walking down the street when the leaves were falling, and they came to a place where there were no trees and the sidewalk was white with moonlight. They stopped here and turned toward each other. Now it was a cool night with that mysterious excitement in it which comes at the two changes of the year. The quiet lights in the houses were humming out into the darkness, and there was a stir and bustle among the stars. Out of the corner of his eye, Gatsby saw that the blocks of the sidewalks really formed a ladder and mounted to a secret place above the trees. He could climb to it. If he climbed alone, and once there he could suck on the pap of life, gulp down the incomparable milk of wonder. Our eyes lifted over the rose beds and the hot lawn, and the weedy refuse of the dog days along shore. Slowly the white wings of the boat moved against the blue cool limit of the sky. Ahead lay the scalloped ocean and the abounding blessed isles. "I'll get some whiskey," answered Tom. He went inside. Gatsby turned to me rigidly. "I can't say anything in his house, old sport." "She's got an indiscreet voice," I remarked. "It's full of..." I hesitated. "Her voice was full of money," he said suddenly. That was it. I'd never understood before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it. The jingle of it, the cymbal song of it. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl. It was 7 o'clock when we got into the coupe with him and started for Long Island. Tom talked incessantly, exulting and laughing, but his voice was as remote from Jordan and me as the foreign clamor on the sidewalk or the tumult of the elevated overhead. Human sympathy has its limits, and we were content to let all their tragic arguments fade with the city lights behind. 30. The promise of a decade of loneliness, a thinning list of single men to know, a thinning briefcase of enthusiasm, thinning hair. But there was Jordan beside me, who, unlike Daisy, was too wise ever to carry well-forgotten dreams from age to age. As we passed over the dock bridge, her wan face fell lazily against my coat's shoulder, and the formidable stroke of 30 died away with the reassuring pressure of her hand. So we drove on, toward death through the cooling twilight. "I want to wait here till Daisy goes to bed. Good night, old sport." He put his hands in his coat pockets and turned back eagerly to his scrutiny of the house, as though my presence marred the sacredness of the vigil. So I walked away and left him standing there in the moonlight, watching over nothing. I couldn't sleep all night. A foghorn was groaning incessantly on the sound, and I tossed half-sick between grotesque reality and savage, frightening dreams. Toward dawn, I heard a taxi go up Gatsby's drive, and immediately I jumped out of bed and began to dress. I felt that I had something to tell him, something to warn him about, and morning would be too late. I can't describe to you how surprised I was to find out I loved her, old sport. I even hoped for a while that she'd thrown me over, but she didn't, because she was in love with me too. She thought I knew a lot because I knew different things from her. Well, there I was, way off my ambitions, getting deeper in love every minute. And all of a sudden I didn't care. What was the use of doing great things if I could have a better time telling her what I was going to do? She didn't see why he couldn't come. She was feeling the pressure of the world outside, and she wanted to see him and feel his presence beside her and be reassured that she was doing the right thing after all. For Daisy was young, and her artificial world was redolent of orchards and pleasant, cheerful snobbery and orchestras which set the rhythm of the year, summing up the sadness and suggestiveness of life in new tunes. All night the saxophones wailed the hopeless comment of the Beale Street Blues, while 100 pairs of golden and silver slippers shuffled the shining dust. At the great tea hour there were always rooms that throbbed incessantly with the slow, sweet fever, while fresh faces drifted here and there like rose petals blown by the sad horns around the floor. The track curved, and now it was going away from the sun, which as it sank lower seemed to spread itself in the benediction over the vanishing city where she had drawn her breath. He stretched out his hand desperately as if to snatch only a wisp of air to save a fragment of the spot that she had made lovely for him. But it was all going by too fast now for his blurred eyes, and he knew that he had lost that part of it, the freshest and the best, forever. "They're a rotten crowd," I shouted across the lawn. "You're worth the whole damn bunch put together." I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever gave him, because I disapproved of him from beginning to end. First he nodded politely, and then his face broke into that radiant and understanding smile. as if we'd been in ecstatic cahoots on that fact all the time. His gorgeous pink rag of a suit made a bright spot of color against the white steppes, and I thought of the night when I first came to his ancestral home, 3 months before. The lawn and drive had been crowded with the faces of those who guessed at his corruption, and he had stood on those steps, concealing his incorruptible dream as he waved them goodbye. I have an idea that Gatsby himself didn't believe it would come, and perhaps he no longer cared. If that was true, he must have felt that he had lost the old warm world, paid a high price for living too long with a single dream. He must have looked up at an unfamiliar sky for frightening leaves and shivered as he found what a grotesque thing a rose is, and how raw the sunlight was upon the scarcely created grass. A new world, material without being real, where poor ghosts breathing dreams like air drifted fortuitously about, like that ashen, fantastic figure gliding toward him through the amorphous trees. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Dacă nu era clar, 5 din 5. Perfect.